Добрый вечер.
Good evening. I'm very happy to welcome you here to this session, and I'd love to thank everybody who has come here, and I'd love to thank all our panelists. So you're most welcome to participate in this discussion, which is going to be about city clusters for entrepreneurship. My name is Yulia, and I'm going to moderate this session. I'd love to say a few words about myself. I work to support innovations and entrepreneurship. I started my work in TECHNOPOLIS, which was from Finland, and now I help different regions and different cities, and I provide consulting, which is about supporting different innovations and entrepreneurship. I work a lot in Russian-speaking countries, Kazakhstan, Russia, and others, but I worked in Botswana and in Ireland and other countries. So I did my best to make this discussion as interesting as possible, and we have very interesting speakers here today. But before I give the floor to the speakers and let them introduce themselves, I'd love to give a short introduction for our panel discussion. Like I said, it's going to be about city clusters for entrepreneurship, the centers that help support innovations, that attract business. And this is not something new. We've always had different innovation hubs, business incubators, whatever name you have in mind. It's quite clear what we're gonna talk about, and we're gonna explore it from different sides. And I wanted to focus on three different trends that are reflected by our speakers. So one of such trends is related to some potential investor but sometimes it's very interesting to do a joint work, and that has been very important. Another trend that we can see is that the companies and entrepreneurs are ready to take some risks. Before now, I have often heard about some misgivings. Some people say, what if we share our ideas and then somebody will steal it? But now the entrepreneurs see the advantages of opening up and sharing their ideas, because the advantages of such ideas are much higher than the risk that somebody might steal this idea. And therefore, we have more and more co-working centers, and so entrepreneurs are no longer afraid of their conversations being overheard by somebody else, by some competitor. And one other trend, the third trend, is that there's a growing understanding that we should support not only a technological entrepreneurship, but some other businesses as well. Most producers focus on technological business because it can grow fast, it can become global, it can change the world if you create a new technology. But many people also understand that the design of a product is a factor which is no less important than IT. And the companies that work in services are companies that create jobs, and companies that work in arts and culture usually get their inspiration from the local environment. So there are less risks that they're going to take their business away to some country that has cheaper labor force. So therefore, we have these speakers that represent different areas: design, social entrepreneurship, and technological entrepreneurship. And I would like all the speakers to introduce themselves, to introduce the concept for attracting entrepreneurship. And then you'll have a chance to ask your questions. So I hope that our audience will be very active in asking questions, maybe sometimes tricky questions. We don't mind. So thank you. So we are having here with us Evgeniya Egarmina, who is the General Director of Design Factory Flacon. We have Jeffrey Robinson, who is the Director for the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development, and he works in New Jersey Social Innovation Institute. And we have also Igor Ischenko, who is the Chief Executive Officer TECHNOPOLIS Moscow. So let's start with Evgeniya. Can you tell us about your design factory and what services you offer and what kind of companies it attracts? Good afternoon. My name is Evgeniya. So our creative cluster is going to be 5 years in May, and it's called Design Factory Flacon. It's quite centrally located, it's located not far from the center. So what is this creative cluster like? So what we have here, 10 years ago, there was an industrial site here, a former plant named after Kalinin, and it produced glassware for perfume. But we revitalized this site, and we created this design factory Flacon. We accommodated about 200 different bureaus, companies, and studios. We have advertising companies, event. We have great events, sports, and it's a great platform for celebrations and festive activities. We have 3 areas for co-working, which have been very successful. We have a market area where we present different unusual brands of clothes and other things. We have children's studios where parents can leave their child for a whole day. We have some educational projects. So you can basically stay at this site for 24 hours and enjoy yourself. So speaking about the audience, that's the image from one of our events. And you can see some facts about the audience. They are creative people mainly that come to get some inspiration, to get some ideas. And every month we have very big events visited by a few thousands of people, from 2,000 to 5,000 people that can attend these events daily. We have some country studies workshops. We had days of Spain, days of Finland, when we try to create a special atmosphere of the country. We try to show some customs and traditions, some performances that we bring from these countries. The most important thing that we're proud of is our community, and they are people that have become friends. We have about 250 companies on our side, and of course many start working together and come up with different projects, joint projects. So we are proud of our community, and you can meet all kinds of people in a cafe, and it's very often that people get together, sometimes become married, have children together. That's our space. We have very unusual offices, and It's a freestyle office. You can put hammock there. You can build some unusual structures. All the offices have this creative style, and there are 3 restaurants, and you can celebrate your birthday. You can have some workshop there, and for example, you can come and make some shelves, or you can do something with your child using leather and other materials. So we have a co-working area, and speaking about our projects for 2014, we are going to launch a capsule hotel, which is going to be presented in October. So please come and visit us, and I hope you like it. We are also about to launch an educational project which is called The Chair or Cafedra, and we are going to present it in September this year, and we are going to give lectures, different workshops, and we work together with the Department of Culture and some universities here in Moscow. So this is our co-working space for 180 people, and it's never empty. Lots of people come and work, and you can either rent this place for one day or just come here every day. That's the picture of our loft. That's a multimedia space. You can use it for some charity event or for some presentation. And we have 3 different sites that can be used for events, either run by us or by somebody else. For example, if you want to address the audience that come here, they can use this space. And we're always happy to give it to somebody else. So that's our action park, and it's been very successful. Last year we had a swimming pool, a volleyball playground, we had a stage, and we had lots of musical and educational events. During the 5 years, we have become a multifunctional organization, and we organize great events. And for example, when we had the Days of Finland, we made Finnish sauna, and people could use husky dogs, and we even had the reindeers, and people could take pictures with them. In 2012, according to our residents' request, and the residents are those people that lease space from us. So people that liked our place wanted to buy some office space so that they could live there. So we were thinking of a name for this community, for this space. So we decided to go beyond any classification. We didn't want to name ourselves Offices A or Offices B, so we decided to call ourselves Class F, because that's how our community calls themselves, because everybody is a free person who wants to express themselves creatively, and we have different backgrounds, so we wanted to interact. That's why we called ourselves F-class offices. And that's what we have promoted. And here you can see 5 signs of this F-class. So it's about cultural activities, integrating city events and activities. And actually we are going now to organize some events for the whole city. And it's going to take place in Crimean embankment, close to Gorky Park. Then creative atmosphere. Here you can see some quotations from different magazines. And according to Afisha magazine, we became the best place in the city. So that's another picture of our art object, and we have such trolley bus. So thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Evgeniya. It was an interesting presentation and a very interesting work that you are doing. Actually, the term itself, innovation, it's not a technology, it's a realized competitive advantage that improve the society or improve the environment. I know that you are very ambitious, and you say on your website that this design factory became an epicenter for cultural life and increased the attractiveness of this region. Can you make a comment? Yes, you can imagine that Moscow is huge and there are lots of suburban areas. And if we trace the history of this local area, I can tell you that 15 years ago, parents would never let their children go outside without them because it was a desolate industrial area. There's a bus terminal. So it was a very difficult situation, and now the situation has changed, and many people change their views of this place. Many people come here to spend some time, to leave their children in some creative workshops or to visit some exhibition that is held once every fortnight. So I can say that we affected this area, and the Department of Culture asked us to create a similar sports that would attract people. So now we are having negotiations with the authorities. I'm not afraid to reveal the secrets because I know that there are many rundown libraries in different areas of the city. Nobody uses them, so we are thinking of renovating those spaces and just become in charge of different sports, especially in the light of the recent events in Biryulova. You probably heard about that conflict with migrant workers. So thank you for this presentation, great project. And now I would like to give the floor to other speakers. And the next person I'd love to tell us about himself is Igor Ischenko. And Igor is going to give us a second example, what can be done with the old factory. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd love to start with my compliments to design factory Flacon. It's a great example showing that sometimes you don't have to follow the easy way. You can do something else, and it can be so successful. And I think we should exchange our experience with the design factory, and we'll be happy to learn something from you because it's very important to continue learning. So speaking about our project, it's called TECHNOPOLIS Moscow. This used to be a big manufacturing plant called Moskvich or AZLK. So it was associated to some failures in car manufacturing, because it's true that our Russian automotive industry was not so well developed. And so how did our project begin? 3 years ago, we had a new team of the city authorities, and the new mayor, Sofya, set us a very challenging goal. Lots of production facilities began to move away from Moscow, whereas Moscow was always a very industrial city. So it was a very challenging situation for Moscow, trying to see what's gonna happen to people that were working in science and education and other spheres. What kind of new environment and new labor conditions Moscow could offer for them. Moscow is an expensive city. It's an overpopulated city. It's not a logistically easy site. So all these difficult issues had to be considered, and of course, even though we had some disadvantages, we knew about advantages, because Moscow produces a large demand related to industrial production. It's a very rich city. It has more than 50% of scientific capacity and student capacity of Russia. And of course, the Moscow government had to use this to their advantage. Before Technopolis Moscow, a lot of work was done in different areas, so we tried not to reinvent the wheel. We tried to analyze the best practices in Singapore, in Europe, in Silicon Valley, when we could do something good. We had only 3.5 years, and by the year 2015, this project should be completed. And I mean both physical infrastructure renovation and creating all kinds of points of growth, providing all kinds of services and supports. So we had to go through this cycle in 3.5 years. And like I said, we went to different countries and talked to different organizations. And usually it took 10 years to implement similar projects.
350 offices, and some of them is office space or production space, administrative offices. In other words, where staff works, which manage production process in the industrial part of our project. A few figures to illustrate what I have said. When this project started, we chose this site. I mean we, when I say we, I mean our team who started managing this project, since we realized it's a unique site which has a high level of energy supply. I mean sewage, energy, and the base. Our energy does not simply exist in megawatts. It is two independent sources and the ability to supply any class of safety of energy supply for any class of production. So for us, it was a kind of start which allowed us to build support mechanisms. You can see this zero property tax and 15% lowered income tax. Standard things. And some things are not indicated here, and I will mention it orally. The conditions for all the projects is free, and those who tried to do business in Russia know what does it mean to get technical conditions in Russia. It is long, not very expensive, and not very transparent. At our site, there is no corruption. If things are free, they are free. If certain things need to be paid for, they have certain prices and based on market assessment, including the price for square meter. In connection with this, this is a small illustration. It is not just 90 megawatts. It is a pipeline which allows to, which takes care of any technological cycle. Understanding this unique basis of utilities, we tried to structure the whole set of clusters, which is actually a norm for such project all over the world. And on the other hand, Moscow can afford it, taking into account all the restrictions on the price of productions in Moscow. There are 4 such clusters: new materials and composites, microelectronics and robot techniques, biofarms, and ICT. These are the main 4 areas which use all the technological advantages which we have today in energy, logistics, etc. Our task was, if necessary, we could place warehouses there, and it will only take us 6 months. This year, in June, our project will be 3 years old. We are fully complete or reserved, all our spaces. Advanced manufacturing area, here we have an open door, and we welcome any technological advanced company which satisfies the criteria of our site. Basic criterion is that we want to develop and create not only opportunities for development in technological projects, but these projects should be tied in with R&D phase. All of us understand that in the cycles, pace of the development of technologies, 2 or 3 years, innovation stops being an innovation and becomes something ordinary. So packet solution is necessary in the whole cycle of our residents, from R&D and according to our recommendations, their products should be competitive all worldwide. For certain products, we have sub-clusters connected with the defense complex of the Russian Federation. This is a different approach, and this is only amounts to 5% within the framework of all the clusters which I have just described. So today, strictly speaking, we have fulfilled the task of promoting our site for the purpose of sale or transfer to a long-term rent. Since these spaces are municipal, we only have one cycle, one long-term rent, based on the cycles that are determined at open auctions, taking into account market evaluation of the price per square meter. But this is not our main business. We format the site as a structured solution, which allows us to create not just an infrastructure, but a number of services and solutions which makes the site unique and competitive on the global basis, which allows us to attract residents. We have a queue, and it allows us to say that the strategy was correct. Now we are trying to stop offering the site all over the world and try to focus on the quality of services. We have launched a logistics center in the Technopolis, and we have also launched a customs center, which is quite unique in contrast to the customs centers that are always criticized. Science-intensive products can be cleared within 1 day, strictly speaking, 2 hours. We have launched a center which allows to make this site not just the presence of industrial solutions. It is a park which attracts people who can see their future around this industry. Students from university students, people involved in R&D, and regulatory specialists. We interact with a number of ministries. The Ministry of Industry and Trade participated in approving the law and industrial policy. The ministry conducts a number of events which allows us to use our experience and implementation of applied topics in draft laws, which make our projects more tactile as to the beneficiaries of these projects, as well as legislation. The structure of services implemented within a city concept will allow us to have about 10,000 people working in this location who will change the structure of employment in this area and will allow us to attract. We work with a number of educational institutions. Institutions will allow us to attract a great number of people who see in such sites the main place for using their talents, because in the whole range of solutions, from startup block, which we are already creating, and up to R&D and small and medium-sized companies. We are now closing this cycle. By 2015, we will have built a hotel, a powerful data processing center, and we are formatting the heavy infrastructure, second-level infrastructure, a number of services which will allow people to work and live there around the clock. Workers will be able to live there, and we have a few projects with capex of about $200 million. These are dozens of engineers who come from Europe and the United States. It could take them about 6 months to organize the technological cycle. You understand what it means to live in Moscow hotels. It is quite expensive, so we try to take that into account in this environment. We try to create a city within a city, including what Evgeniya has said, fun zones and restaurants and even beauty parlors. The task is to make this site to change the face of this site and forget about the last years of Moskvich factory, when it was associated with a bucket of screws and nuts. This is a kind of branding and reputation, and a new branding and reputation, and we intend to rename the metro station Tilshiki. We have an intention, and the federal government agrees. We want to have open innovations. It will be a big site where China will be the partner, and it will be opened by Medvedev. There will be a lot of things to be discussed. For the first time in the history of Russia, innovations will be discussed at the place of these innovations, and not in deluxe hotels and marble walls. This is the history which formats a new approach to the solution of such problems. With WINZAVOD, together we are creating a new phase for open innovations. Here you can see some details which may not be of interest to everyone, and we have a lot of residents and partners currently, and we understand, and it makes us happy that the solutions allow us to form new industries or sub-industries. I mean, composite materials industry. We are forming a new industry in Russia at our site. In Russia, it has not existed as an industry, and I hope this will happen at our site. We are forming microelectronics industry in the sphere of chips, magnetic and resistant. The project that has come from the Silicon Valley. It is French and American research with the participation of Rosnano, and Moscow can be a successful place for investments. I think that the main thing is to remember about two things: to create a simple set of requirements and make them creditworthy. Then things start developing quickly. Thank you for your interesting story. Interesting example of different concepts using the territory of an old plant and make it a center of attraction for entrepreneurs. I would like to ask you, the center of attraction for entrepreneurship in Europe, one of the goals why they are created to motivate people to open business, take risks. Many people who create their business incubators, new businesses, these are people who would not dare to open their businesses without such support. If you didn't have this site, is there a risk that the company wouldn't come to Russian market? And if it is not Russia, where our main competitors are globally? You promised to ask tricky questions. It's a clear question, and everybody asks it. As you know, people are looking for better conditions, like fish is looking for deeper waters. There is a popular Russian occupation to create a technopark, and they are created with a different degree of success. In Tatarstan, this strategy was implemented successfully, and there is a special economic zone in Kaluga region where conditions are created. However, Our situation is, and it is a fact, that Moscow, by its capital status and a number of advantages, and I can prove it, Moscow has a very high level of university education and a high level of scientific specialists. Moscow is quite competitive if you create infrastructural potential. And if we get rid of stealing, if this situation exists, we are quite competitive worldwide, and those who come to Moscow are expecting markets of Russia and Eastern Europe, or are prepared for that for those markets, and they are attracted by structured solutions provided by Frost Institute, Nano, RVK, RVC, and they allow to realize the risk appetite. I'm speaking of big projects now. Speaking of medium-sized projects, this is also our size, which allows us, beginning with this size, to grow them to become big projects. As to small and medium-sized projects, there is a whole structure in Moscow that has been created. My colleagues are here who had technopark zones. One of them is in Zelenograd economic zone, and today this is a whole formatted strategy of the government of Moscow, which allows, based on logistics limitations, to choose, well, whether you want to work in Zelenograd or Tekstilshiki. If we didn't have Tekstilshiki, people would go elsewhere. And we, being fully booked now, are interested, and Moscow is interested in this successful example, and we hope it will be repeated in other places. Moscow has 200,000 hectares of industrial zones, and there is a lot of room for improvement. Thank you. Another interesting thing, technoparks, centers for attraction of business. This is one of their key features is that companies not simply work on one territory, but they also cooperate with each other. You can see yourselves when you see small and medium-sized companies, cooperation is developing everywhere. But when it comes to big companies, like in your case, many centers see a lot of difficulties. How do you develop cooperation among your residents, and how do you try to develop cooperation among?
On the one hand, of course, there are principles for competitive work, but what I can tell you from my experience, the residents of our center create a very special environment for living together. So it's something that they benefit from. And we identified 2 companies dealing with microelectronics, and we are about to sign agreements with 2 more companies. So these companies form a network. Another fact that I can give you is that while working with infrastructure of secondary level, when we create special space, we try to adjust the solutions that not only provide synergy for the residents, but also they have a set of structural decisions, and this helps them to certify the product, to train personnel, and do everything in one one place. And like I said, those premises, we organize them in a special way. And it's not just we wait for people to come and use that space. We find people that might be interested, and we provide optimal environment for them, making sure that it's not very expensive, and to make it as quickly as possible. And now I would like to give the floor to our guest, Jeffrey Robinson. I decided to give him the floor after the Russian speakers because he's not only the head of a center, but he's also a researcher, and he's got great analytical skills. So it would be very interesting to listen to him, and maybe he'll provide some ideas to our discussion. So, Jeffrey, if you could tell us more about social entrepreneurship and urban entrepreneurship. This is something new for us, for Russia.
Julia, спасибо. Добрый вечер, everyone. It's my honor to be here, and I thank you for sharing this platform with me. I come from a university called Rutgers University. I'm going to call it the other RU today, because I know the abbreviation for Russia is RU. I'm from the business school, and our approach to thinking about these topics centers around the idea of urban entrepreneurship and economic development. We look at these two things as related to one another, that you cannot have successful economic development without promoting and supporting entrepreneurship. Our center is in Newark, New Jersey, which is in the New York City metropolitan area. From our Newark campus to downtown New York is only 18 minutes by train. Our center has several activities that we partake in. I'll give you an overview of those activities, and then I will come back to the topic of how we look at the city clusters and perhaps some of my insights there. The Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development resides at the Rutgers Business School. We have 3 areas of activity. Our first area is particularly education. We educate entrepreneurs, and of course we have our student entrepreneurs who are taking up a concentration or a minor in entrepreneurship. These students can come from the undergraduate population from any school throughout the university. They can be business students, but they can also be engineering students. They could be students in the arts. They can be students in economics or social science. They could be students in the sciences. And they all take, or if they are inclined to, they are taking classes with us in entrepreneurship. The graduate students as well can take courses in a concentration in entrepreneurship and innovation. Our second area is research, and my specialty in research is looking at social entrepreneurship. And then the third area, which I'll spend the most time on, are what we call our economic development activities. These activities fall into several areas, and it relates back to our view of how there are different ways to cluster the activities and the interests within the urban area. So we first think about clusters in terms of neighborhoods, where you could focus your attention on a particular part of your urban area. For us, there was a couple of streets that were in the city of Newark that were underdeveloped, but their location was ideal for different kinds of startups, restaurants, arts activities. So we focused our efforts on the neighborhood as the cluster. And the university, through our efforts, supported any entrepreneur who was willing to come to this particular street location, 1 block away from our campus and 1 block away from some of the arts area. An ideal area, but for many different reasons, underdeveloped. Over a 5-year period of time, now that street has been redeveloped. Our students have helped businesses writing business plans and supported them in many different ways. That's the neighborhood cluster. A second set of activities. We think about our city in terms of the types of sectors. So you've heard on my right Igor talk about the Technopolis and technology as a cluster. And on my left, you've heard Evgeniya to talk about the creative class and the arts. Those are two ways to think about clusters and sector. A different way to think about this, and what we have been doing, is also thinking about the clusters in terms of types of entrepreneurs. But before I go there, at our university, we also have a technology incubator, and we are just launching what we call a hatchery. Now, the difference between a hatchery and an incubator is that the hatchery looks to the students at the very early stage of their idea. We provide space to these students, we provide mentoring and support to their businesses, while we find the best students, undergraduate students who have these ideas from our classes, and we provide them with a summer boot camp, which is training for entrepreneurship, and then provide them with space that will begin in just 2 months. Let me speak to the last area of clusters, types of entrepreneurs or types of enterprises. In the United States, we have some of our minority groups and women entrepreneurs. The rate of entrepreneurship is very low. And so we have specific initiatives to attract and to support women entrepreneurs and minority entrepreneurs. This allows us to not only give them training and support, but also to increase their effectiveness and decrease their rate of failure. We also have clusters related to social enterprise, and this is one of the programs I'm running. We call it the New Jersey Social Innovation Institute. And the purpose of this institute is threefold. We bring the sort of educational and training activities to our university. Anyone who is interested in social entrepreneurship and has an innovative idea, we ask them to apply for this specialized program. We bring them together. The applicants that are successful come on into our training program, and then that leads us to the second part. The second part and second purpose of this initiative is to provide them with a network of other social entrepreneurs. This social entrepreneurial activity, combines the enterprise with creating social effects or social impact within the communities that we're serving. And then the third activity we do within this institute is help these social entrepreneurs to plan for investment, whether they're raising their own money or providing or using crowdfunding, or whether they are looking to attract social impact investors. We provide them with support. So these activities I just mentioned, once again, they fall into three categories. Neighborhood clusters, thinking about it on the neighborhood or community level. Secondly, thinking about this in terms of industry or types of enterprises. And then thirdly, the type of enterprise that is either social entrepreneurship or driven by a particular type of entrepreneur. For us, these have led us to some success. We document those successes. If you're interested in some of those, you can certainly come and see me, and I'll provide you with some of those details.
Спасибо, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I know that you teach entrepreneurship. So do you see any difference between, for example, those people that want to set up social enterprises or those that want to set up technological businesses? Is there any difference between these two categories of students?
Good question. I don't know if you were aware, but this is a central part of my research. We looked at the patterns of the types of entrepreneurs that were developing social ventures and traditional ventures, and we began to understand that there were some specific differences. But let me talk about the commonalities. All of these entrepreneurs are very motivated to be successful. They are all looking to be innovative. They are very good at networking and to connecting and making partnerships with others. But the social entrepreneurs have one additional aspect. It would be obvious to say that they have an interest in supporting society or making a social impact in a positive way. But the other aspect of this goes back to looking at their history. Sometimes we find social entrepreneurs who come from the world of NGOs, or they come from the government agencies, and now they're looking for a different approach to do some of the same work they were doing before. So those entrepreneurs are very interesting because they already have a very good firm and a very good understanding and a passion for serving others. But now they're taking their interest and putting it into an enterprise. Some of these folks we say have a calling orientation, meaning that there is a big reason, a superior reason for them doing this. It has nothing to do with just making money. It has little to do with being just achievement-oriented. They are someone who says, I have to serve society because it's something I'm very passionate about. And then the last thing I'll say is that sometimes we find the business people who have a specific interest in a social issue that maybe affected them or affected their family or something where they were volunteering in. And now they say, well, it's good that we have charitable ways to address these things. But what we find is that they have analyzed the problem and think that there is a more enterprise-like approach to address the same problem. And so they're making a shift with their business expertise to now addressing it for the social sector. And for these folks, the training is important because now we give them some tools to understand how to measure that impact, how to use the innovative business models, and of course, how to be financially sustainable.
Спасибо. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I already switched into English in my head. I wanted to ask you this question. Like you said, social entrepreneurs focus on the local community. So do you think their ideas are global? For example, are there any people that focus on some export opportunities, which means going beyond the borders of their country and come, for example, to Russia or other countries?
There are many of our social entrepreneurial, we call them fellows in part of our program, are looking beyond the borders of the United States, looking globally. Because the social problems they may be interested in are related to poverty in developing nations, or it may be something to do with their ethnic or cultural heritage. So yes, there are several who are looking beyond it, and the principles, however, are also global. So we look to support them by providing them with ways to partner, to help them think about exactly what their social impact will be. To understand how they can be financially sustainable and not only rely upon the charity or to think about this in terms of only looking for foundation support. We encourage them to find ways to develop income, earned income strategies, or to figure out ways that they can provide services that somebody else will pay for. And then lastly, this very important aspect of measurement. Sometimes this is something that's overlooked by NGOs, that measurement is not only good for evaluation, but that measurement is also good for process improvement, which is something, it's a core business principle, which we are now also bringing into the social sector.
Я бы хотела задать один.
I would like to ask this question for all speakers. So I'd love to ask all our speakers about this, and then I'd love our audience to participate in this discussion. So my question is, about multidisciplinary abilities. Everybody in the world says that it's important to develop interaction between engineers, businessmen, education community, etc., because it's very important to make these joint efforts to be successful. But in practice, I don't think there are many people that manage to overcome this barrier between designer and engineer, for example. So do you think that there is such barrier, and what we could do to overcome it? Jeffrey, perhaps you could start, and then I'll let the opportunity to do this to other speakers.
A most obvious place to begin these kinds of interactions is in a classroom. Having access across the entire university to courses in entrepreneurship, or specifically social entrepreneurship, encourages some dialogue and conversation. So in my classrooms, I have students who are partnering for projects who are already learning from each other. And so this becomes a practice for what they may be able to do later on. And then secondly, another approach for this that we've used is, I guess, once again at the university level, is to have business plan competitions where the teams must be interdisciplinary. And we are able to encourage them as an incentive that in order to be in the competition, you must have some cross-disciplinary team. And in both cases, we see this is a good model for what they will do as they leave the university.
I follow the principle ladies first. But okay, I'll say what I think. Everybody says that demand creates supply. So is there any demand for innovations in this country?
Yes, there is to a certain extent, since we are speaking here and even achieve something. On the other hand, I think that the main criterion which I would like to proceed from is the existence of internal freedom, the ability of a person to take risks, the ability to take failures as training and not as a catastrophe, etc., which makes us different from the world which we normally use developed world. However, I don't think we are underdeveloped. We are just different. And in my view, this ability to take a broad look of the world and to learn fast, not to be afraid to cross the borders that we heard about at school or at the university, is the general recommendation. And it is the recommendation of the problem everybody is discussing in Russia. We have great fundamental developments and inability to commercialize them. Apart from pure technology, there should be a driver, an engine, the impulse created by a person, which can make any idea work practically and offer it in the right package. Thank you. Evgeniya? I think that the appearance of such creative clusters as ours is a proper way to meet with such people. And I agree that this atmosphere, which is created in such places, is the correct way to start thinking freely and express our thoughts. This is why new projects are born, and they will go beyond the boundaries of our country. Do we have any questions from the audience? Lilia Babrova, entrepreneur. Question to you, Evgeniya. could you calculate the number of unique visitors a day? And the second question about entrepreneurship is, how effective are your entrepreneurs in conducting their business? To attract customers through events, it is quite difficult. And how do you cope with other sites that also have events, celebrate occasions, and what problems do you have in terms of attracting visitors, entrepreneurs? Thank you. The first question on unique visitors, it's about between 200 and 500 in warm seasons, because most of events are organized outside. As to how we attract them, our creative companies that rent our spaces, even without our events, they have people, their own databases, and internet sites. As to the market zone, these are events when within 2 days we have like 8,000 people. And this is crazy. This is a great drive for everyone. We call them residents of Flacon. We don't try to compete because we have our own content and corporate style. It is creative, and the visitors who come to see us are not standard either, unusual. Sometimes families, not only very young people, but families come to see us, come to our site, and children can create in different competition, can participate in different competitions, or make some objects like sledge. Do we have any more questions, please? Andrea Noshin, I have 2 questions. One to Evgeniya. When you are speaking, why there is no comparison with Auto Business Center, and they have designers and architects among their residents? This is the first question. And the second question is for Igor. I would like to understand, in Moscow Technopolis, are there any conditions for small innovative companies, or is it meant only for medium-sized and big companies? What you mentioned about Zelenograd and Strogino, it is too far from the center of Moscow. Technopax is very small, and Strogino is almost dead and is not it does not have a good location. If I compare ourselves with Art Play, of course, Art Play has a better location, but Art Play is for designers or architects who want to buy something unusual for their homes or offices. We are a multi-format site, and you can find design bureaus and architectural bureaus, but we have more advertisement agencies, and our community is different. Our site is smaller and more cozy. Communication between people is better. And that is why we have a lot of new projects, because people exchange ideas, which results in new projects. Thank you for the question. I would like to protect my colleagues from Strogino. He may beat you up later. As to the size of projects that we welcome, we really have limit on such objects. It is based on constructive specifics of our spaces, because smaller spaces are economically unjustified, and a resident that comes to our site, it would be too expensive for him. And there are other limitations too about pure processes in technological cycles, when we can give any practical solutions connected with ICT cluster, where their own production scheme is based on an office model for launching residents. We can, well, any size of residence is welcome. And this is why we bought, together with the government of Moscow, we bought from Roelofson 14,000 square meters, where we will format space connected with forming conditions for launching startup projects and forming a place for training programs, retraining programs connected with implementation of tasks, while forming a closed cycle. We want to make this cycle closed. This is our task, and we will solve it before 2015. I hope we'll see you again, and in 2 years I will be able to tell you more and even invite you to that place. In Strogano, based on my information, there is a long queue for exhibitions, and they don't have enough space. Another thing I would like to add is, when you say that everything is far from the center, in fact, for manufacturers involved in production cycle, I don't mean office space. In fact, the key factor is a metro station next to us. Doesn't mean that it should be some central metro station. Operation expenses connected with central underground stations are very high. In Strogano, it will be cheaper. It is impossible to develop business with such operating expenses. You know what Moscow is like. So welcome to Strogano, Tekstilshiki. These are the right places. It is nice that our audience is reminding our speakers about about competition between different centers for attracting business. And I think that no matter whether these are techno parks or incubators, this should be business as usual, business that provides services to its customers, residents, and they will decide which concept is to survive. I've seen a lot of centers world over, and many of them still lack clear explanation for their own customers what we are offering, what customers we are expecting, and what you can get as a result. If we take a car producer, they explain it better. Thanks to competition among centers, soon we will come to the same solution. I suggest that we change the subject in the direction of our entrepreneurship, and I have a personal question to the speakers. Do you think you are entrepreneurs, and how do you develop your entrepreneurial and creative capabilities? How could you share your experience with the participants? Who would like to begin? Of course, we think we are entrepreneurs, and naturally, to create such a successful project out of an old industrial zone, this is a success story. And the owners of the factories who started revitalizing this territory did not expect this project to be so successful. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, Mr. Matuszewski, the owner of our factory, will organize an excursion, and he will tell you about his impressions from 10 years ago. He will tell you about the stages, all the stages and steps. So if you are interested, please join us at 5 o'clock. Thank you. Jeffrey?
Skills.
I am definitely an entrepreneur. My first venture I began when I was in the university. We ran this business out of our dormitory. And for some of you in this room, what I will say will be unfamiliar to you because you live in a digital age. But once upon a time, we had CDs and compact discs. We had records on vinyl. And my roommates and I sold these to other students because it was a long distance from our campus to go to the store. With our business model was next day service. That was 1995. Since then, I've developed 6 businesses. The largest of these is a large consulting company, I should say medium-sized consulting company that does work for the federal government, municipal governments, different levels of government within the U.S. But now I apply my entrepreneurial aspects to how we are approaching our Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. So I believe you can use these same skills to affect change in large organizations as well. So we have a term for this. We call it the intrapreneur, inside of the organization, using those entrepreneurial skills. Because if any of you have worked at a university, you know it's a very bureaucratic place. And some of the things that our center does are unusual to the rest of the university. And so this is another way that I'm entrepreneurial. And then lastly, I'll say my wife, my family is entrepreneurial. My wife and I opened, we call them a day spa, where we have these services for mostly for women who come there. And this business has been operating for 5 years. And my wife is the primary entrepreneur for this venture, and I support her. So entrepreneurship everywhere for me. Now, I expect my children to do the same.
Thank you. Спасибо.
Ну, я могу сказать, что
Well, I can say that both me and my team are all from business. Some of us are from the energy sector with a big background in the sphere of different industries. Some of us are from investment banking, and this is a connection of the city and urban sectors. I think that the proof for it is the following. By 2017, we'll reach EBITDA of $30 million. By 2015, we'll issue shares, and we have applications for free float, and we hope we'll issue that. What we are doing today already forms a sort of demand, not just for infrastructure, but for a commercially oriented company. That's it. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Unfortunately, I joined you later, and you said that innovations are connected with the freedom of thought. How would you comment on the fact that Russian economy is monopolized, and this is the main factor why innovations are not in demand now? monopolization prevents free thinking. What can you say about monopolization of economy? Does it prevent free thinking? Who would like to answer? Well, there is a logical chain, which I think it was quite logical. It's a difficult and long process, and I hope that everybody in Russia understands that to live with the current structure of economy is a suicide. In the last message of the president, it was said, fortunately. For me, I have heard several revolutionary ideas. The structure of economy does not suit the federal government, and it is connected with the fact that we should format certain goals and create certain realities which would be attractive for businesses. And I don't believe in evolutionary method when it takes decades for us to learn to be innovators. At the same time, nevertheless, the federal government and the president are saying that, well, in any case, this forms the demand. As a historian by education, I know history quite well, and all the reforms were also organized from the top. I hope we'll be able to avoid a revolution, but to decrease this lag by using technologies and minimizing technological lag. I know this on the basis of energy. In Finland, Julia has come from there, and I often went to Finland on business trips. We are lagging behind by 30 years. I think it's utopical to develop faster than the United States. We need to transfer technologies, and we need to learn fast. At our site, we can see that quite often expatriates, engineers, normally like to work together with students from Bauman University, and I think then that in 2 or 3 years, these students will be as educated as those foreign specialists. So we have some potential. How should we use it? Does our structure generate a demand for innovations? Of course not. However, under the circumstances, there will be no short way to solve this problem. This is my opinion. I would like to remind you that an innovation is a realized competitive advantage, and the more Russian companies will compete on the global market, there will be more competition here, and there will be more wish to implement innovations. Thank you. We only have a couple of minutes, so if you don't mind, I would like you to continue the discussion after the session. Just one question. Is anybody willing? If there are no questions, I would like to thank you for the fact that it is already late, 7:30. Thank you for attending this session. Thank you for attention, for your questions, and we will be happy to exchange contact information with you and discuss everything that we haven't discussed at this session. Thank you very much.